Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're diving straight into a brand new, highly debated documentary that looks at the science, economics, and sociology behind animal sacrifice. We're going to break down the claims, the hard science, and the societal framing presented in the source to help us really understand what is a deeply complex issue. Let's get right into it.
Here's our agenda for today. We're going to look at the context of the accusation, comparing cultural traditions, the economics of meat, biology and human diet, the neuroscience of animal pain, and finally, the Islamic slaughter method. We'll be moving from sociology right into the hard science.
All right, Section 1, Context of the Accusation, Narrative and Origins.
So the source actually kicks things off with this pretty polarizing quote from a religious guru. Those with compassion are Hindu, those without are Muslim. They use this to perfectly highlight the emotional rhetoric we're looking at today. The documentary argues that this kind of language creates a totally false binary, right? It frames one group as inherently compassionate and the other as inherently cruel. It's essentially constructing a political narrative without actually looking at the underlying facts. And to ground this narrative in reality, the source points to a tragic event from September 2015. A man named Mohammed Akhlaq was lynched in Dowdry over totally baseless rumors of storing beef. The documentary argues that this just shows how the language of animal protection is frequently weaponized. It's used for political violence and to marginalize minority communities, rather than springing from, actual compassion for animals. Moving on to Section 2, Cultural Traditions, Comparative Analysis. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the documentary looks at other cultural practices that just sort of get left out of the public debate. They point out that large-scale sacrifices are deeply embedded in various South Asian traditions. Take the Gadi Mai festival in Nepal, for example. Back in 2009, up to 500,000 animals were sacrificed. 500,000! And these are mass sacrifices in open fields where the animals actually witness the slaughter, and it often takes multiple strikes for larger animals. The source also lists daily sacrifices at the Kamakhya temple in Assam and massive sacrifices during festivals like Durga Puja and Dussehra. So the documentary is suggesting there's this selective amnesia happening. People are ignoring these widespread practices just to target one specific community.
Next up, Section 3, Economics of Meat. The Global Corporate Machine. 1.42 million. That is a massive number. It represents the metric tons of beef exported by India in 2023 alone. That staggering volume actually makes India one of the top 3 global exporters of beef. To put that massive tonnage into perspective, we're talking about over 7 million animals processed annually in India just to supply this international corporate meat market. The crucial point the documentary makes here is the sharp hypocrisy of it all. You have people labeling a localized religious practice as cruel while completely ignoring a multi-billion-dollar state-sanctioned assembly line designed purely for corporate profit. This is absolutely crucial to understand because it reveals how economic realities are often totally divorced from moral outrage when there's global money to be made. All right, Section 4, Biology and Human Diet, the Omnivorous Reality. Shifting gears from economics to science, the source points out a basic biological reality. Humans are omnivorous. Our digestive systems are literally designed for both plants and meat. We don't have the multi-chambered stomachs of herbivores, and we don't have the super short tracks of pure carnivores. We sit right in the middle. Plus, essential nutrients for our survival, things like vitamin B12, iron, and high-quality proteins, they are most naturally and efficiently sourced from meat. The documentary argues that predators consuming prey is what maintains the natural balance of an ecosystem, meaning eating meat isn't an unnatural cruelty. It's a fundamental part of our biological survival. The source argues that completely removing ourselves from the food chain kind of ignores how human physiology actually evolved. Which brings us to Section 5, Neuroscience of Animal Pain. Animal versus human. The documentary makes this really interesting argument that a lot of the outrage against meat eating stems from anthropomorphism. Now, if you're not familiar, anthropomorphism is when we project our own complex human emotions, psychological trauma, and anticipatory dread onto animals. We basically assume, totally incorrectly, that animals experience fear and pain in the exact same psychological way that we do. The documentary brilliantly illustrates the strict neurological divide between us and them. Humans have a highly developed prefrontal cortex. That means we experience anticipatory pain. We agonize over things before they even happen, and we carry psychological trauma long after. But animals? They rely primarily on a nociceptive system. This system is essentially just an immediate physical alarm to escape danger. Imagine a sheep bumping into barbed wire.
They feel the physical stimulus, they react to get away, but once they're safe, they aren't sitting around experiencing lingering psychological dread about the future. The source argues that confusing an animal's basic biological reflex with complex human psychological trauma is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the science. Let's move to Section 6, the Islamic slaughter method. The mechanics of zabiha. So, having laid out the biology, the documentary breaks down the actual mechanics of zabiha into specific, scientifically grounded steps. Step 1, hide the sharpening tools and other animals from the subject. This prevents any psychological fear or stress beforehand. Step 2, deliver a swift, precise cut to the jugular veins and carotid arteries. Step 3 is the resulting rapid drop in blood pressure. The source really emphasizes that this specific cut is engineered to bypass the brain's pain receptors almost instantly.
Now, you might be wondering, why does that rapid drop in blood pressure actually matter? Well, it causes cerebral hypoxia. This is a condition where the brain is deprived of oxygen, leading to rapid unconsciousness. The documentary states that the animal actually loses consciousness before it can even register the pain. Any thrashing or movement you might see after that, those are merely involuntary spinal reflexes happening while the animal is completely unconscious. It is not an expression of conscious suffering.
Beyond just the physical mechanics, the source highlights how this practice builds into a larger economic and social model, specifically during the festival of Eid. Unlike corporate hoarding where everything is driven by profit, this practice actually mandates equitable distribution. The meat is strictly divided into thirds. 1/3 for the immediate family, 1/3 for relatives and neighbors, and 1/3 strictly for the poorest in society. This ensures the most vulnerable receive high-quality nutrition completely for free. It's framed as a really powerful model of community welfare. The documentary leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. Is true compassion rooted in acknowledging biological reality and ensuring equitable sustenance, or is it rooted in political rhetoric? The source challenges us to look past these weaponized political narratives. It asks us to seriously consider if true compassion actually lies in scientifically minimizing an animal's pain during a necessary biological process, while simultaneously feeding the hungry. It's for sure a perspective that forces us to re-examine our own inherent biases. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the narratives around you.